This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. G'day everyone and welcome back to Basket Case Clubs. My name's Michael Connolly and it is my pleasure to be your host on this journey today. Joining me as usual on this journey of basket casey goodness is my brother, Steve Connolly. G'day, Steve.
And the pleasure is actually all mine to be on this journey with you. Thank you for having me back. I can't believe you haven't cracked the shits and replaced me yet.
That's not to say we're not working on it. Who could I possibly replace you with, Steve? I've only got another 3 brothers and a sister.
Hey, and I'm currently actually listening to the episode from your interview with Richard from Western Sydney University Student Union, and Nathan did a great job.
Yeah.
Matt has done a great job recently. Scotty has been in a webinar/podcast session, so maybe I am being dislodged.
Slowly phased out.
Yeah.
Put out the pasture, as it were. Yeah. Hang on. Aren't I older than you? Hey, I want to start on a somber note today, if that's okay, because I am in a little bit of mourning and grief. Some prick, and that's the nicest word that I've said.
Well done.
To describe this person / these people, stole my car. Now, this is not an old piece of shit car. This is my pride and joy, my baby, my 2016 SSV Redline Commodore. And yes, it was red. And yes, and listen to me, in the past tense, I'm mortified. So I don't know what the message is here. If the prick who stole my car is listening, please own up. I'm totes devoed, although it's probably in a chop shop getting pulled to pieces already. If you happen to have seen my car with our CPR number plates on it and you want to let us know, that's the best notification I can
call out that we could do. Yep, probably. Yeah, but look, there is probably a basket case clubs related learning outcome here, which is make sure that you have your assets insured. And so in the world of not-for-profit delivered sport particularly, we do hear sad stories of clubs being underinsured, whether that's relating to injury to people and, clubs we've talked about in the past, some of the sad examples of clubs that haven't had voluntary workers insurance. Their voluntary workers have been injured. The club's gone to claim against public liability insurance. The insurer has said, we're really sorry, but you're not covered for that, so we can't give you any money. We can't pay out. So this is a good reminder of the importance of being appropriately insured and taking time to actually review your levels of cover. Now, some clubs are going to have insurance that comes with their affiliation with governing bodies. Other clubs and not-for-profits, charities, are going to have to make sure that they do their own due diligence to make sure they're appropriately insured. But so although you can't bring your car back, and it's actually the sentimental value of the vehicle because they're not made anymore and they're impossible to replace.
Thanks. That makes me feel heaps better.
Yeah.
Here, have some salt with that wound.
To our listeners, a reminder that I am Michael's brother, and this is part of my job description. But at least you're not left high and dry from an insurance perspective. There's a small silver lining.
Fingers crossed, yes.
Good
fingers
point.
Crossed, obviously, we've got to make sure that the payout all happens. I have all of this keys and spare keys locked safely in my key safe. So this was a very targeted hit. It was, pro job. I'm not happy. And these are the nicest words I've used in about the last 36 hours.
Yeah. It's as you and I have discussed, it's the violation.
It's my stuff, man.
More than anything. That's right.
Yeah. It's not yours. I was talking to mum and dad about it, and I said, when I play golf, if I walk past a golf ball that isn't mine, even if there's no one in sight, it's not my golf ball. I don't pick it up. It's not my golf ball. Like, if I need a golf ball, I will, and I need golf balls when I play golf.
And when I play golf, if I walk past a golf ball, I don't know if it's mine because I don't know where my shot went.
You hit so many, you don't remember. Was it a Shrixon? Was it a Titleist? Was it TaylorMade? No, you're not. When you play off the handicap that you and I have. You don't typically hit good balls. You hit whatever's in the
Yeah,
bag.
that's
And
right.
depending on the
Whatever your
lie,
mate gave you, yeah.
yeah. If it's, teeing off over water, I'm going to pull out the crappiest looking oldest ball I can.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
no matter how many times you say, what water? What
yeah.
water has it? You're still thinking
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. Water. Splash. Darn it.
Yep.
Again.
Got it.
So I want to talk about house sports tracking in this country, Steve, today.
Hmm.
And I think that there's going to be a few episodes in this, and I want to start with kind of a state of the union, if you like. And let's talk about sport, particularly because we work in grassroots sport. So let's focus on this being a grassroots sport discussion because it's obviously necessary. Sport's healthy. We got participation going in the right direction. We've got, COVID blips and sicknesses and whatever's happening in the Middle East having an impact on fuel prices, maybe keeping a few people away from training for a few weeks or doing a little less as mum and dad can afford to travel less. But sport's doing well. Participation's up. It's doing real well. It's doing real well. It's doing really well. It's doing real good,
Doing
mate.
doing real good.
It's choice, bro. It's I think that the issue though is the pressure that is being placed. I was going to say you and I certainly don't place pressure on volunteers. Our job is to try and alleviate the pressure on volunteers. Try and find the release valve that doesn't let the whole thing blow up. And I think that if we don't do something serious, like if we don't have material change fairly quickly, because the world moves very quickly, and when we did strategic plans, when I first started in this job close to 30 years ago, we'd do a 5-year plan. Have you got your 5-year plan? Is your 5-year plan up to date? Have you got your 5-year development? 5 years, man, the world changes so quickly that 5 years is too long. So we prefer to work in 3-year planning cycles, but realistically, you have to do a review every year because the world changes so fast. But I think in the short term, we need to have a really good hard look at the system of grassroots sport in Australia. We've talked a lot about how sport is business. It's it might be a hard truth for some people to deal with, but we have to start treating it like that. So what I think is the challenge is that clubs, the pressure that's being put on clubs by parents, by government, is increasing, but our clubs, and more importantly, the people who voluntarily choose to run our clubs, sometimes spending as much as another full-time job's worth of time for which they don't get paid, mind you,
Mm.
they've got to absorb all of that pressure, but they don't necessarily have access to the right sorts of tools to be able to keep up with the expectations. Expectations of professionalization, expectations of even expectations of cleanliness. Now, I know that I have fairly high expectations of cleanliness. Look, here's my hand sanitizer. In my house, it's never more than a reach away for me to get some hand sanitizer. But so that means that, and I'm not alone. When I go to a facility, I want it to look good. If I eat at a canteen, I want it to be clean. And I don't think that that's an excessive expectation. But you add that on the child safeguarding mechanisms that have just been increased, rightly so, by the way.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
as I explained the other night in a workshop, when we talk child safeguarding, that all of the whichever department or agency in each state and territory looks after it has a stack of paperwork they require volunteers to do. It might be the better part of a foot deep, and metaphorically speaking. But they look at it and they go, yeah, look, I realise that that's a lot of paperwork, but this is child safeguarding, so it's important. So it's okay for us to give that to volunteers in clubs. Okay. But then we've also got the fair tradings and the consumer affairs and access camera and whatever, each of the kind of consumer affairs departments around Australia that look after incorporation. And they say incorporation is important. So they've got a stack, it might be 10 centimeters thick. And they go, yeah, look, it's a lot of work to do with the annual reporting and the audits and everything that they need to do to remain incorporated and keep their constitutions up to date. But this is important. It's the legal structure. So we think that stack of paperwork is reasonable, and they do the same. Grant agencies do the same. Councils with leasing or whatever form of tenure. You've got sometimes multiple forms of tenure, the lease over the building and a right to use or permit to occupy for the fields. There's another big stack. And they go, yeah, but this is legal access to our facility and authority to make money out of something owned by the public. So that's reasonable. What they don't see is what the volunteers see, which is that those stacks of paperwork are all sitting on top of each other. And so, as a volunteer, now we're looking at a pile that's standing waist high, chest high off the ground that we need to be doing all the time, and we don't get paid for it. So those clubs that grow, that then do employ people to do it, are they still putting themselves in the best position to be able to do that efficiently? Or are we just creating so much duplication and waste where we've got multiple clubs all doing exactly the same thing and reinventing exactly the same wheels and making exactly the same repeat spreadsheets just because that's what they're up to?
Mm.
So, again, what I'm getting at is that on the outside, sport can look really healthy. And especially in the run up to an Olympics, when are we 26? I've just had the Winter Olympics, so now we're on the runway to LA and then we're on the runway to Brisbane. So it can look very healthy and it can look like we've got a good runway to where we're going and a good pipeline of talent and athletes coming through the system. But expectations have changed and it's just becoming harder. And I think that we really need to be looking at the model itself and improving that model before it breaks to the point of people just throwing in the towel and saying, I'm out of here, baby. I can't do this anymore.
And unfortunately, we do see that. It's interesting that departure, the rapid throwing up of the hands and walking out because of the what are deemed unreasonable pressures placed on those volunteers who stick their hands up for no money and, like you say, in some cases, spending as much time, if not more, at their club or in their volunteer role than they are at work. What's interesting to me is it hasn't seemed like we've seen a steady decline in volunteerism. So the volunteering rates in Australia since 30 years ago, we've seen a consistent and sustained decline, and there seems to be some periods. The blip that you mentioned in relation to COVID is probably one of them, where we see a bit of a plummet and then things plateau for a while because we were so disconnected from our communities and our community organisations during COVID. But what's interesting for me is that we seem to go through a bit of a roller coaster or cycles where in some years it seems like we're fielding a lot of calls around AGM time from clubs that are saying we can't get people to stick their hands up. Those of us who are walking away are fed up, burnt out, we've just had enough. And maybe there's a correlation there between their outward expression of that frustration and the lack of others willing to stick up their hands. But it hasn't seemed like a steady decline there. It seems like some years are just worse than others for that, where we'll have a handful of clubs that are saying we're at risk of falling over because we have no people sticking up their hands. And in many cases, most cases, those clubs do find people to stick up their hands. But what I have identified is a bit of a pattern whereby it's that breaking point where clubs are more likely to seek out opportunities to do things more efficiently and spend a bit of money, implement systems that saves volunteer time. Whereas when things are just going all right, and we've got people sticking up their hands to take on the volunteer roles that become available, and we're not hemorrhaging people and we're not hemorrhaging money, our facilities are just all right. It's really easy for clubs to just get or remain complacent and get stuck in that neat little box of good that we've discussed, and good being often the enemy of great. It's not until things are really dire in a club that typically we see drastic action taken. So just as you've been talking, the thing that has come to mind for me is that the likelihood of change, unfortunately, actually, where my mind just went is a talk that I listened to Dr. Carl present, and he was talking about climate change and the fact that, and I can't remember now because it was probably a couple of decades ago, but he was talking about realistically, the investment and the short period of time that would be necessary for us to find alternative energy sources and to have a material impact on greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. But until things become dire and it actually starts to affect individuals in their day-to-day lives, it's unlikely that will happen.
Yeah.
So it's like that little incremental progression that's happening behind the curtain that you can't notice because of the incremental change that's taking place.
Until you
And
look over your shoulder.
and that's exactly right. And I wonder if that's part of what's playing on your mind here. That we're experiencing uh, lots of incremental change, and you pointed to the cost of living, and obviously a global pandemic, which is still within this decade, and the uncertainty around what's going on globally, and the prospects of significant war, affecting us in our day to day lives. But there's this reality for many people that they can ignore all that shit and just get on with their day to day volunteer role and lives and so on. But what's the real impact that's going to present itself at some stage? And as we often say, it's the important stuff that clubs don't focus on because it's always the urgent stuff that takes their limited amount of time and all their attention. And things aren't urgent until they become urgent. So we talk about having a great constitution and making sure that the document is sound and provides clarity so that when you're having a fraught election at an AGM, you refer to your constitution and you know exactly what to do.
So I think the inevitable, to spoiler alert, is volunteer burnout
Yep.
leads to forced change. And when change is forced, it's typically government that intervenes and then government getting it wrong. Government saying, oh, we got to do something. We've got to do something. This is something. Let's do it without considering, is it the right something to do?
Hey, what about gender equity and sport policy provisions that have come out of the federal government and now being rolled out in various states and territories? That's the first thing that came to my mind just then when you said that, and it's. I think that's a whole other debate, and I think we've touched on it in the past, and it's certainly something that interests us because we're a consultancy that says skills-based boards are typically going to be more successful and able to achieve greater outcomes than a representative board where people are in a position just because they're in some other position or they're representing their club, for instance. But this notion of necessary affirmative action for the short period because we've had a gross underrepresentation of women in the boardroom for far too long and we're missing out because of that, we support. We think that's a necessary step, and it's a move that I can already see in the organisations that are enforcing gender equity provisions on their board. They've got discussions happening and change taking place in their clubs that they never would have had it not been for those discussions taking place. But some of the provisions about 50-50 on the board and so on, I don't necessarily think have been necessarily really well thought out. So to your comment a moment ago that if government gets to the point of enforcement, then they're not necessarily going to get it exactly right. So,
yeah, they'll oil the squeakiest wheel or go with what's going to get the most votes or what's trending on TikTok. So I want to go back
and maybe it'll depend on which colour government is in power as well, which again is
no. Don't pretend that it's political, Steve. Come on. I want to go back to your point before we get drawn into a political debate. I want to go back to your point about good is the enemy of great. I think that perfection is not good. Perfection is something, it's an unrealistic expectation, and it drives people to burnout or drives people to procrastination. Because until I get this perfect, I'm not releasing it. Therefore, it's never perfect. Therefore, I never release it. Therefore, I never have to be held accountable for it. As far as business goes, iterate, baby. Get it out there, minimum viable product, put it into the marketplace and see how the market responds. It might be fine as it is and cost you far less to produce a widget than if you tried to perfect it and then find out the market doesn't want it. But I think it's not necessarily good is the enemy of great, because good enough, perfection, not good enough is good enough. I think the real challenge is that people are not even getting to good enough. They're just getting to not a train wreck, not broken. And then I'm seeing volunteers who will accept a role reluctantly, what we call the reluctant mums and dads who take on committee roles. They'll accept a role reluctantly and then do the bare minimum to see their term out and then run away. And And so it's not broken. They just have to nurse it through. So what that means is we've got committees that are still nursing very old systems and very old models. We've got clubs that are still running on spreadsheets and new people coming in not getting a handover and not finding out that the seven people in their role before them all developed their own spreadsheet, all of which were almost exactly as the same as the one that they've just spent the last 48 hours preparing, sleepless nights. We've got people in roles that are very unclear. They're not well defined because to define it is to create a system, and creating a system is extra time. And I'm just here to hold this baby until I can give it to somebody else next year. Handover, if it happens, it's weak. More often, it just doesn't happen. As I said, the systems are usually not there, but where they are there, it's just what I can remember to talk about. So there's these really weak, ineffective systems. Meetings that people have get dragged into operational detail. There's no strategy. There's no look. They don't have budgets. We've talked about this. Clubs don't have budgets because doing a budget is on the business work, and we just don't have time to do on the business work because we're so busy in operational detail. That then means we've got the STP, the same 10 people. If you're lucky, the T is for 10, the same two people, the same three people who do everything, those core volunteers in the middle. And often they're the possessors of all of the corporate knowledge. So if they're a husband and wife team and they both leave the club at the same time, we go backwards so much. What this all comes down to, I think, is that the structure is too weak. So we're operating typically with incorporated associations around the country. It's a good model. So let's start actually with the not-for-profit model. I actually think that not-for-profit is a fantastic business model for sport. The confusion, as we've banged on about for 30 years, is that people think that not-for-profit means that we can't make a profit. Not-for-profit means we need to finish the year with the same or less money than that with which we started. Bum, bum, not true. What it means, and this is a far better way to think about it, is because members aren't shareholders and therefore cannot be paid a dividend for any profits that are a surplus to our needs, it means that every cent is retained as working capital. So maybe the model should be called something like a retained working capital model. Like that's fantastic because members can, even when the club is wound up, you can't go and take that money back. It must stay for public purposes and go to a same organisation that is also not for profit, but also has the same or similar objects. So I think that that model is okay, but the fact that we've got so many clubs all doing exactly the same thing, and we don't, and then we've still got the federated model that is persisting. We've got sports, and full disclosure, we work with horse sports, for instance, where we've got Pony Club on one hand and equestrian on the other hand. Now, from the outside, you go, horse sports, shouldn't we all be the same? And I recognize that there are differences and we don't need to be the same, but we can definitely eliminate waste and duplication. For every individual organization that we've got, that's a set of financial statements. Whether audited or not, they need to be done. There's an annual return, annual return fees. But let's just look at the volunteer load. There's a president, there's a treasurer, there's a secretary, there's probably a vice president, there's probably a raft of operational positions, all of which are duplicated and all of which are creating brand new spreadsheets for everything that they do every single year. So talk about duplication and waste. So this pressure just builds and builds and builds. What I'm worried about, and I've been talking about this for 25 of my 30 years in this industry, is that it's going to break, is that the pressure is going to become too much. And as I said, we will be forced into a position where clubs are dragged along kicking and screaming. What would be far better is if our clubs become the architects of their own future. And we have a visionary model that says, let's analyze. It doesn't have to be complicated. And with the AI tools at my fingertips, how many tabs have I got open? One, two, three. I've got 7 tabs open at the moment. Yep, 7, all running different AI models. They're all working while I'm doing this podcast. This is probably the most important thing I can be doing right now, but also right now I'm doing 7 other tasks with 7 tabs open. Our clubs aren't adopting AI that quickly, so we've got the ability to get AI to help us implement the model. We're the humans. We've got to come up with the best model, but we've got to be brave. We've got to be braver than I think we have ever been, and we've got to be more acute to the warning signs. So what are those warning signs? We've got the same people doing everything. We've got the situation you mentioned before where we've got people not wanting to take on committee roles. And not that I want large committees, but we do need to have enough people to be making the right decisions and that they're the right, that those people, if they don't have the skills as they come in, they've got access to those skills very, very easily. So things like our induction programs. And they want to know what to do because they want to get better because they want their clubs to succeed. They don't want to just sit in a role to just nurse it because somebody had to be treasurer. If we don't have the depth of organizations all duplicating, all doing their own things, and yes, that might mean consolidation, call it merging, call it amalgamation, consolidation, which means that let's still have our individual clubs as far as the deliverers of the service on the ground, but how can we consolidate what happens above that so that we've got efficiency and we've got much stronger not-for-profit businesses? Remember, not-for-profit meaning it's all retained working capital, so that that working capital can then be leveraged with all forms of investment. Yes, I'm talking grants, but I'm also talking about sponsorship investment. What are our sponsors want to invest in for their own benefit? Because now we've got access to bigger databases and we can sell to more people. Whoa, who'd have thought about that? Diversification of revenue streams because again, we've got more people. Our marketing becomes more effective. We can start doing split testing. We can prepare a budget and actually have a plan, a financial plan for the future. And to, again, be the architect of that plan. We've got far too many clubs not doing a handover, or if they are doing a handover, it's really weak, dodgy decisions, or more importantly, no decisions. We just procrastinate and we say, oh, we don't have the information to make that decision. So we get into analysis paralysis, or we abdicate our decision making responsibility as committee members and put it back to the members. Again, incredibly inefficient because typically that's going to happen at the AGM. So we're putting off strategic investment decisions and asset development decisions until an AGM because we're abdicating our responsibility to run a good business.
I I agree with the frustration I think that I'm hearing coming through in what you're expressing there in
Oh, and I
terms of
thought I
some of
was
those
failing my frustration.
being so diplomatic. But the thing that so budgeting, yes, attracting investment not only through grants but in other more sustainable ways. I think the thing that we've been talking about quite a bit this year and last year, and I think this discussion is going to continue to ramp up, is the idea about revenue stream diversification. And for me, I see some really low hanging fruit. So, some of the entrepreneurial ideas that we've been sharing with clients. And if any of our listeners are interested in talking through that, then get in touch with us. We've got some resources that we can send you to get you and others on your committee thinking outside the box. But I see so commonly that challenge of coming in and just nursing. I like the term that you're using, nursing the position and just getting by for the year or however many years you're filling your position and just handing it on in the same shit state that you got it without having implemented systems to improve the efficiency or output. Exactly as you were just discussing then, having 7 things being done with your AI models at the same time that you're doing an 8th task, which is the highest and best use of your time at that particular point. But for me, this I see as an in because clubs love the idea of money. They love the idea of having more money, and particularly once we help to dispel the myth about what not-for-profit really means. And I often, as you know, use the term profit for purpose, and that's a term that I think lands really well in the same way that you articulated the benefits of the business model, where you're retaining capital for growth and to support your future endeavours as a club. The only thing that you can do with the profit that you make is deliver on your purpose, deliver on those objects that are listed in your constitution. So therefore, clubs love the idea of money, especially once they understand that they can make lots of it and they can make lots of profit. The only thing that they can do with that is good. The only thing that they can do with that is deliver on their purpose.
So yes, so long as, I think you said so long as, and I think that's the key because you said clubs love money. I I wonder if all clubs love money. And we're not talking clubs, we're talking the people who are responsible for running the clubs at any given time. So the
Yep.
accountable
Yep.
representatives, the committee. All too often, and please correct me if I'm wrong as I'm challenging your premise here, But all too often, they're so busy in the operational detail, making sure the grass is mowed, making sure the lines are mowed, making sure the goalpost nets are up, making sure the pads are up, making sure that the
Mhm.
courts are swept, that they don't think about loving money. And you don't need to love money because you can't personally benefit from it because of the
Yep.
wonderfulness, what I call the self-limiting factor of not-for-profitness.
Yep.
It's all retained working capital. But they need to understand that if we had more money, we would have better options. We would have
And
more choices available to us to be able to make our lives as volunteers easier.
yeah, and I think that's where I'm going with this thought is that when asked, wouldn't it be nice if you had an extra $500,000 in the bank to do all this stuff that you've just told us you want to do through this strategic planning discussion? And when we've challenged you and said, okay, how are you going to fund this? How are you going to fund that? We get the inevitable answer, oh, we'll get a grant for that. So wouldn't it be lovely if you had all this money to deliver these wonderful outcomes? I agree with you that unfortunately, as volunteers, we're often so snowed under just getting by, just surviving as a club and as an individual volunteer, that we don't have the luxury of time to watch the grass grow and think about how wonderful it would be and how many wonderful outcomes we'd be able to deliver if we had more money. Nevertheless, I still see that this opportunity for generating more revenue to be able to do more good is a potential foot in the door here for us to challenge or disrupt the long held thinking in clubs that we've just got to get by until we can step out of this position.
Yeah, flick past the job to somebody else.
That's right. So maybe this is, given the interest that has been expressed to us when we've shared some of these entrepreneurial and revenue stream diversification ideas with clients of ours over the past 12, 18 months. I wonder if this is a potential in to start to challenge and get volunteers thinking differently about what their club could look like and how they could go some way to catching up with the expectations that are now placed on them in a modern world, whereby they're not being well supported by good systems to deliver on that expectation.
Mm. Uh, we're going to come back and keep having this conversation because there's some nuance to it that I don't want to miss, but I also don't want to rush it.
Mm-hmm.
So before we wrap up, you mentioned the opportunities that we can give to people for diversification of revenue streams. I don't want our listeners to miss that. So
Mm.
all you need to do, find me on social media at NFP Michael. LinkedIn's fine, Facebook's fine, Insta's probably the best because I want you to go and LinkedIn or Insta, where the messaging platform's really good, connect with me and then send me a message that just asks for the business toolkit. So even if you just write business toolkit in the message, I'll know exactly what you're talking about and we'll get a copy to you. It's it's really funny because I gave it to someone and as I watched them reading through it on their phone, their eyes were widening and they can just see they go, I never thought of that. And they said, how can you give this stuff away for free? Like, surely this is stuff you've got to sell to make money. And I said, I want to die with no secrets. If I take this to the grave and nobody does it, or one of our clients does it and they really benefit from it, whoop-de-doo. But if 1,000 clubs do it, or if we've got even just, let's say 30 clubs in the same league, all doing the same thing, then the expectations of our members go up, but our ability to deliver goes up. At NFP Michael, business toolkit, something like that. So what happens with volunteers is it's very rare. It does happen. It's very rare that a volunteer throws the toys out of the cot and storms out in a huff, slamming the laptop closed and yelling F-bombs as they storm out the door. Yes, it happens. And yes, presidents have their tires slashed at failed AGMs, which is all crap, by the way. Like, it's true that it happens and it's terrible. Like, don't treat people like that. Don't treat people like shit. Be nice, do no harm. Isn't that the hippopotamus oath or whatever? I think it's Hippocratic Oath. Anyway, most volunteers don't storm out. Most volunteers fade away. They just fade away quietly. You start noticing, and this is something that I shared on social media a few weeks ago. They start missing meetings. Then they're slower to respond. They start to be absent from game days where they used to be a real they were always there, a stalwart of the club. And then they're just gone. And it's because nobody reaches out to them and says, how are things going? What can we do to better support you? clubs go the same way. It's rare that they go out with a bang, and we see those in the media, and we talk about them on basket case clubs all the time. But it's more common that they just are absent from the league one year and then they don't come back. So we see senior cricket clubs are like this, where they whittle down to one team and they're scraping the bottom of the barrel each Saturday morning to get dudes who aren't too hungover to go to play a game of cricket, and then they're just not in the comp next year, and nobody remembers. They just quietly fade away.
Mm.
So what we're trying to do here, and I want to be really clear about this because we do push the professionalization of sport. And it's because if we get to be the architects of the future, and by we here, I mean us mums and dads that run sports clubs voluntarily, if we get to be the architects of our own future, then we get to create a model where volunteers aren't burnt out and where volunteers aren't replaced, but instead we're creating a model where we are setting our volunteers up for success. We are creating jobs for our volunteers where they can add unique value, where they as humans, we as humans, can add value that a machine can't. So Chatty G ain't going to take my job because I'm the human that can empathetically relate to another human who is the parent of somebody who was not selected in the Premier League, a Premier grade team or whatever. Like we, and I know as I'm saying this, I know that people do rely on Chatty G or Claudia or Jemmy or Perplexity for emotional support and advice. But a human's going to do it better because a human, and we're, especially when we've got the brain space too, because I can actually focus on what's next for this kid. Not that you've failed to make that team, but it's your time, your turn for that team is next year, not this year, or it might be next year. But here's the pathway. Not you failed. Here's the pathway to get into the team because we've got the time to invest in those relationships, and that's what humans do best. Relationships on their deathbed, the two things that people talk about are health and relationships, maybe in the other order. Nobody ever says, gee, I wish I'd mowed the lawn to the right 7.8 or 78.2 millimeters that week. No, they remember the relationships and the friendships that they've built, and they want health for themselves and health. So that's what sport is all about, man. Sport is all about relationships and health. So let's set our volunteers up for success in delivering those roles by reducing the unnecessary burden that duplication and waste places on our reluctant mums and dads, and let's make them excited mums and dads who are not only putting in the right amount of time, which is they're not burning out, they're also getting amazing fulfillment from the time that they're putting into their clubs. Whew. Hope we brought that home okay. Because yes, I was
Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that
definitely
be?
exuding my frustration there a little bit, wasn't I?
Mm. It's a very interesting discussion.
Yep.
I am grateful for you looping me in on this discussion, not
Thank you for
others.
letting me rant at you for half an hour or whatever it's been. So yeah, this little mini series we're going to do, it's not about blaming volunteers. This is not a blame on
Yep.
volunteers. It's a systematic failing that we need to address in the way that we look at sport. And we're just coming off the back of a couple of media articles that have frustrated me to the point of wanting to do this. And we're looking for often looking for people to blame in club blow-ups, but we got to look to the system first. It's rarely it's rarely a people problem. It's usually a process problem or a me problem because I didn't put the process in place in the first place. So we got to stop the blame, whether it's the volunteers here now, the volunteers here before us. But we do need to name the pressure that our volunteers have been carrying and make sure that we're asking the right question. So, where is pressure building and who's carrying it? And that's identifying the problem is the first step. Acknowledging that we have the problem there, because then we can be well on the way to solving it with these structural, systematic changes that we're talking about. That are really exciting. Right, I'll stop there. Thank you for joining us, Steve. Thank you for being my punching bag today. Apologise for the ear bashing you got. If you're not already following us on social media, make sure that you do so. You'll find us at CPR Group, and you'll also CPR Group Oz, I believe it is, and at NFP Michael. And look, I probably haven't made enough of a thing about it, but every single day, I'm making sure that there's something that I'm posting that can help you guys, because there's not enough support. So we don't, I mentioned at the top that we don't have the tools available to our volunteers. That's why I want to provide them. So please follow me there and ask as many questions as you want. If you want to know more, we will tell you everything that we know. We will die with no secrets here. Subscribe to our website where to our newsletter on our website where you'll get lots of interesting information on the state of of our industry in sport. And of course, we've got a phone call. We've got a phone. So if you want to give us a phone call and have a chat to our wonderful team about how we can help, we're very happy to do so. Steve, as always, it's been wonderful having you here, and I look forward to continuing this discussion again next time.
As do I. See you then.
Ciao.
Basket Case Clubs acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country on which we record, being Yugambeh, Turrbal, Jagera and Kabi Kabi land. We recognise their enduring connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to First Nations listeners.